What is going on, everybody? It is Alex coming back at you with another video, and today we have a very special guest. You might not know Kent by name, but you guys very well might know the relative athletic score. And Kent, you can break down exactly what that means for them as well as for yourself.
Yeah, RAS is a athletic testing system. It just puts player testing metrics on a 0 to 10 scale compared to their position group up to their draft year. Takes all of those individual numbers and it gives you an average, and that average is then also put on a 0 to 10 scale, which gives you a player's overall relative athletic score. The relative does a lot of the heavy lifting in that part. But it gives you a good idea of where a player tests athletically. Everything's on a 0 to 10 scale. You know right off the bat that 0 ain't good, 10 is, and 5's right in the middle. Everything's stoplight color coded, so you can figure out what green, yellow, and red mean. You're off to a good start. The idea is to help players and our fans contextualize the testing for those players and give you an idea whether a player tests well or tests poorly. Not to tell you whether they're a good or bad player, just to give you an idea of where they are athletically from their testing. I've been doing this for about a decade. The site's been up for 6 years now. I think this is the 6th year of the website. And hopefully we just keep doing that for a while.
Well, it's pretty awesome because you're the face of relative athletic score. So it is a pleasure to have you on. Obviously, we like to reference all types of your figures whenever we do talk about these players. So for the fans who are a little bit less inclined on Twitter, we will be hearing the term RAS quite often from even big names like Daniel Jeremiah. So Kent, I do appreciate it. But we are going to be setting this up with me taking the odds. So I get the Seahawks fans to absolutely destroy me at pick 5. And then Kent is taking the evens. So I think we can just start this off. And I don't really need to explain this very much. The number 1 pick by, I think, minus 1,000 odds is Bryce Young. And he is the best quarterback in the class to me. So that's where I'm going to be going.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good pick. Bryce Young didn't test, so we never got any good numbers on him. Aside from his height and his weight, which we know is very, very small. That's the big risk for it. But it does seem to be that's just everything's just kind of fallen in place for Bryce Young to go there. It doesn't really seem like there's a whole lot of other options anymore. And that's recent. I mean, the last couple of days, it was about 50-50 between him and Stroud. And now it's pretty much 0% anybody not named Young.
Yep.
And pretty much 100% Young. So
yeah,
pretty big shift. The Houston Texans, we were talking before, the Texans have an opportunity to potentially trade out of the number 2 spot if they want to. We know they have a need at quarterback. You're not going to get too far with Davis Mills as your quarterback. There just isn't a whole lot of upside as him to a passer. And this is a team that desperately needs to build a talented roster. You can't build around a guy with Davis Mills' skill set. At the same time, they're looking at the potential pick of Jalen Carter or Will Anderson, possibly even Tyree Wilson if they, for some reason, pass on Will Anderson, which would blow my mind. But I don't think that they do that. I think they stick with a quarterback, and I do think that the player that they pick is CJ Stroud. Stroud, similar to Bryce Young, is not a super mobile guy. He has plenty of athletic talent. He can move when he needs to. He's just not asked to a whole lot in the offense. Very poised downfield passer, has very good very good accuracy down the field, in the middle of the field. Just an overall good player. Comps pretty well to a lot of players that are already making their way in the league. So that's going to be my pick.
Absolutely. So at pick number 3, we were discussing this before. I think a trade out is a very smart move for the Cardinals. I feel like if they can both get an early enough spot to get quality, but also be able to attract quantity of prospects, that's going to be the best thing they can do. I mean, they don't even have Byron Murphy on the team anymore, which I don't understand that for a second, but it is what it is. I am going to propose, since I know that I control the odd teams, I'm just going to propose a deal with the Titans right now. There are rumors that, you could trade with the Lions, because essentially if you are in trading away to a quarterback needy team, you're giving Seattle Will Anderson Jr. It is what it is. But I highly doubt that they're going to, or that the Lions are going to be that desperate to move up when they might be more comfortable staying put and getting 2 elite players to insert on a Super Bowl caliber team. Are there any other teams that you would recommend or think about moving up to this spot? Because I know you've talked about some moves that you like to make.
Yeah, the Raiders are always an interesting one. And if they did, I don't necessarily think it would be for a quarterback. They're one of the teams that I think could trade up for one of the defensive players in the draft, just because they need they need a face of their franchise. They need somebody who's going to stand out and be the Las Vegas Raiders player of the future. And a player like Will Anderson could be that guy. We've talked about Jalen Carter as a possibility. I don't feel like they go that way. I felt like they would, even though he's got that troubled history. But with how that's worked out with them lately, I think that they steer clear. But Will Anderson's a guy that they could potentially move up with. I just don't think they have the ammo to contend with a team like Detroit or Seattle. If Seattle decided they wanted to move up, and even Tennessee's got enough meat to be able to move up a good way. I might make an offer with the Lions too. What were you thinking for the Tennessee's offer?
Honestly, I do the Tennessee trade so much, I'm dropping it out of the equation. I literally did it earlier today, but Tennessee essentially would be trading a 1-3 and then probably a 1-2 next year. It might cost even more than that, depending on how much you value the pick. But for the sake of this mock draft, it's going to be that first round pick. But
read about what I would have offered for the Lions. Because I would be offering a first from this year, second from this year, and then one of their third round picks from next year, probably the one they have from Minnesota.
Okay.
Which gets you to about 113% of value. So you're getting a little bit of value there. The Titans one that you were mentioning was about 120, so a little bit more. But you'd have to weigh that 6th versus the 11th pick there.
Yeah, I mean, if I am sitting here with the Cardinals, I'm more than fine negotiating with you for that number 3 overall selection, or for that number 6 spot. So, what second round pick would you be tossing in there for that 120% value, or 113%?
It'd be 55.
It would be 55. Honestly, I think the Cardinals should be very inclined about that. That could end up being a nice defensive back. You never know. Keely Ringo might slip to them, and I think they have enough issues to where accruing extra draft capital is never going to be a bad thing. So I'm fine doing that trade for you if you are agreeing to that. We're good.
Let's do it. Let's good for the trade.
And you're selecting Will Anderson?
Not with the Lions. No. Actually, really? I am selecting Will Anderson.
I was like, whoa. I was like, hey.
No, I was considering trading up for a quarterback, but let's actually do this. Let's trade for Will Anderson. The Lions took Aiden Hutchinson very early last year. Aiden Hutchinson has turned out to be a very good player so far. They have James Houston. They got in the mid rounds, who's done very well as a rookie. I think he is part of their long-term plans, but picking up a guy like Will Anderson allows you to really build the identity of your defense. And you're not just saying, I need to get good players. You're saying, I need a guy who can move anywhere, who can blitz from anywhere, who can rush from the edge, both edges if he needs to, who can move, who can run into motion if you need him to. He's got the speed to pursue anybody on the back end. He's just the overall best player in the draft for me. One of the most productive players ever. Compares very favorably to DeMarcus Ware and Von Miller, 2 of the best to ever do it. A lot of high praise for a player like that. And if the Lions do trade up and it's not for a quarterback, it's pretty much Will Anderson.
Yeah, I totally agree. I'm going to let you take number 4 since you still have the evens. I'll steal the 5 and 6, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, I'm not going to be super flashy with the 4. The Indianapolis Colts, kind of like the Carolina right now, they've kind of played their hand a little bit, saying that it's kind of Will Levis. He's kind of their guy. It seems like they're more than just leaning towards him. They're leaning very heavily towards Will Levis. A little bit of a risky pick this early, in my personal opinion, but the upside is definitely there. You've got a guy who's got extremely good athletic traits. If Anthony Richardson wasn't Anthony Richardson all over the combine, we would have been talking about how much of an athlete that Will Levis was.
That's fair.
If CJ Stroud wasn't making all those beautiful rainbow deep throws, we would have been talking about how good Will Levis was doing on similar throws. And then he got kind of shafted on his pro day because his pro day was also the same time as CJ Stroud. So he kind of missed out on that too. But I believe the Colts are kind of locking in on Will Levis, and that's going to be the pick at 4.
I like it. Here is my death sentence. Pick number 5. There's Jalen Carter, Anthony Richardson, and Tyree Wilson all on the board. All of them would be excellent options, but I always say this, it's going to probably have at least one of the 3 270 plus dudes, Lucas Van Ness, Tyree Wilson, or Myles Murphy there at pick 20. Tyree Wilson will not be. However, you'll still be getting somebody of a similar size and also good run stuffing ability and overall polish, unless you get Lucas Van Ness. Then it's like, well, you can talk about the rawness there. So I'm focusing more on the unique talents where you can't get somebody remotely close to it at 20. That's Jalen Carter or Anthony Richardson. Jalen Carter, obviously, the talent-wise, might be the best player in the draft. Consistency-wise, up for debate. There are reps similar to what Jordan Davis had last year, or the year that he was at Georgia, where he was not necessarily 100% every play. Might just be because they're in a rotation. We'll see about that when it comes to the NFL. But this is my mentality when I'm sitting here at pick number 5. One, I don't really fully believe Geno is a Super Bowl caliber quarterback. I don't really believe that he will have what it takes to take a team from just making the playoffs to Super Bowl. I don't think he has that Jalen Hurts type of mentality. But I don't also think this team's going to be remotely close to the top 5 ever again or within foreseeable future. So if you're going to take advantage of being able to get someone with insane upside who needs to sit for a year, you might as well go after the quarterback. So I'm going to go Anthony Richardson here.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. That's one of the first mocks that I did this year had the Seahawks not only keeping Geno Smith, but also drafting Anthony Richardson. I think that's a really smart move for the team to do, both for the short and the long term. And not just for him, it's also a good move for Geno Smith.
Yeah.
You know, he gets a nice payday. They gave him a nice payday. He gets to show other teams that he can lead a franchise and that he's not just a fluke. And he makes that decision tough for him if he plays well. Anthony Richardson's the most athletic quarterback we've ever seen, as far as players who've actually tested, beating out Cam Newton, and before him was Dante Culpepper. You know, that's some good names to be in the same ballpark as when it comes to athleticism. So fantastic pick there.
Thank you. I'll let you take pick 6. I'll let you take pick 6 here because I mean I'm intrigued to see your thought process on between Jalen Carter and Tyree Wilson and a DB.
Yeah, and they have a need and they have the picks that they want there. This couldn't have really went better for them. Not only getting extra picks, but still getting somebody like Tyree Wilson or Jalen Carter. And you can't really go wrong with either one of those picks. The Cardinals pass rush was abysmal in last year, and that was even with some of the guys that are no longer there. They've got a huge void that they need to fill there. This is probably the most common spot I think you're going to see Jalen Carter go if he's still on the board at this point.
Yeah.
But I think that Tyree Wilson is the better pick for them as a franchise to get that premier edge rusher who can do everything for him. I think he gives them more from a long-term team building perspective than Jalen Carter does. So Tyree Wilson's going to be the pick there for the Cardinals.
I think that's perfect. That's literally a dream scenario because people are talking about Tyree Wilson being that pick at 3, especially if Will Anderson ends up being that number 2 overall selection. It's hands down going to be Tyree Wilson as the favorite for them with their first pick. So glad to see that they're able to get that extra draft capital and still get their guy. At number 7, I know that you own the Philadelphia Eagles. I want to propose a trade to you. Jalen Carter's on the board, and I really want a defensive back for the Raiders. I don't think someone who's known for having immaturity issues and speeding should be in Las Vegas. Like those are the roads where some of my buddies have hit their highest speed, so maybe not the best environment for him to do so. And I want the best for Jalen Carter. So I want to move back, still be in range to draft the first defensive back on the board, and then still maybe get some future draft capital. So what do you think about a trade with the Philadelphia Eagles?
I'm sure that they'll listen. I mean, it's Howie Roseman. He's always going to be up for a trade.
That's so true. That is so true. So what I was thinking, because the Raiders have a lot of picks, especially day 3 picks as well. I know New Orleans gave an extra second round pick for next year. I was wondering, because I can't convert the math in my head, but that pick that was essentially sent for Darren Waller, that pick 100. What about pick 7 and pick 100 for pick 10 and a second round pick next year? Does that add up mathematically?
That's almost even. You could probably get away with not even including that pick 100 and just offering
pick 7
for 10, and what would be the second round next year.
Yeah.
And that's going to be pretty much an even trade. It's just 7 for 10 and a second round next year. But you're probably going to be able to get something else out of the Eagles out of that. If we add in, say, a future 4th, that bumps up to about 110%. That's probably what people are going to call a bad trade for the Raiders. But I think from a resource standpoint and the way the Raiders are as a franchise, and they have 1 million picks to begin with,
Yeah.
Getting that extra ammo next year, getting 2 extra picks in 2024,
Yeah.
I think puts them in a really good position. So I think that the Raiders would be open to that, and I think the
Yep.
Eagles would be willing to trade up for that, knowing that
Okay.
they've got to beat out the Atlanta Falcons for one of the top cornerbacks.
For
So
sure.
I think
For
that it
sure.
makes sense that both teams would be in on a trade there.
Okay. How about I'm just going to toss in 174 to give a little sweetness for Howie Roseman so he can have one little extra day 3 pick. We'll do it just to be nice.
It's
How
Howie
about that?
Roseman, and he would definitely be
He's
asking for those day picks.
Howie's gonna Howie. Howie's gonna Howie. Okay, so with this selection, can we agree on Jalen Carter in this situation? Because I think that's what they would push to leverage their picks for.
Trading up for.
Yeah.
I think that they would have went for a corner there, but
Really?
especially considering what they have at defensive tackle.
Yeah.
They already have Jordan Davis. They have Fletcher Cox. They have a pretty strong room there. I don't think that they would really trade up for Jalen Carter. Now, I think that if they stayed at 10 and he fell to them, they would absolutely take him. But if they're moving up, they're looking for a guy they think isn't going to be there. So this is going to be a move up for, I believe, either Christian Gonzalez or Devin Witherspoon. In my opinion, Gonzalez is the more likely pick for Philadelphia. They have a much higher premium on athleticism than a lot of teams do. They tend to favor those guys with the size and the length that Christian Gonzalez has.
Yeah.
I think if they did trade up, considering how favorable the trade was to begin with, I think it's going to be your corner, and I think it would be Christian Gonzalez there.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Okay, at pick number 8, Jalen Carter is still on the board. And I mean, I am having this weird sensation that the Pittsburgh Steelers have already tried to make a call up to the Chicago Bears for a player. And I don't really feel like the player value is necessarily correct unless you're going Jalen Carter, or you could go Devin Witherspoon here. But I don't know. I feel like Jeff Okudah's addition might push the priority down slightly. Not that much, but maybe to where they're comfortable going after more developmental. Maybe Deonte Banks is going to be at that selection where they can essentially acquire extra draft capital. What are your thoughts? Because again, you own this pick technically, but I wanted to introduce it as the Steelers owner at 17.
So going into the pick 8, I told they were probably targeting a corner, but I think that Atlanta goes into that not thinking that they're going to have an option for Jalen Carter or Will Anderson or Tyree Wilson. They're going into that thinking those guys are going to be gone. We're going to be looking at our pick between Devin Witherspoon or Christian Gonzalez.
Yeah.
And having a team trade up over them to take a corner may take that may be their first option. That may be the guy that they want to take. And they'll be looking at either Jalen Carter or their number 2 option at corner.
Okay.
To me, that seems like a pretty prime opportunity to get Jalen Carter off the board. At the same time, you could take Devin Witherspoon, and I think that would be a perfectly acceptable pick for them.
Yeah. It's up to you. You're the owner of the pick.
Let's go Jalen Carter there. I think that is just one of those scenarios, a very Ravens-esque scenario where they do nothing and end up with one of the better picks.
It's so true. That is so true.
Every year.
Every single year. I swear the Ravens always get that A+ draft grade. But at pick number 9, the Chicago Bears are here. Unfortunately, Jalen Carter is not. Otherwise, I would totally do the Steelers trade to get up and draft Jalen Carter. I'm a Steelers fan for the record. So if I can get Jalen Carter in the building, I'm not going to say no. But I do believe offensive line is going to be the way that you move the needle the most in the long run. And based on Braxton Jones having success at left tackle, and they said he could play left tackle or right. I haven't seen him play right tackle in the NFL. He wasn't a super early round draft pick, so I don't necessarily trust his pure transition to go over to right tackle. I just want to stick with what works. I'm going to go after a right tackle here, and actually my tackle number 1 in Darnell Wright. Very athletic, very thin right tackle class. Him and DeJuan Jones, the only true right tackles from last year that are remotely worth being taken in the first round. So I'm going to take a very slim and highly valuable commodity here at number 9.
That's a good pickup. The Darnell Wright is a guy I don't think that a lot of people have going that high, but he's so big and so talented.
Yeah,
that it's kind of hard to see a team passing on if they have the opportunity, especially when you have that much of a need on the offensive line. Because as you mentioned, you can move him to either outside spot if you need to, and you can move him inside. He's got the ability to play inside at guard. He's 330 pounds. He's an elite tier athlete at that weight.
Mhm.
And even without considering his heavy weight, he's an elite tier athlete.
Yeah,
So that's easily a pick that I could see them making.
for sure. You are on the
That leaves
board and
me with the Raiders at 10. And the Raiders have quite a few specific needs that they could target here.
yeah.
Um, I'm gonna think that they also go for a tackle, but which
Hmm.
one is gonna be a little bit tougher for me?
Okay. I
They
mean, for
tried.
yeah, for me, I'm a huge Devin Witherspoon fan. That's like the reason I traded back. However, I mean, offensive line, I always have a law. It's like don't ever shame a team for going O line. So, those are definitely the two positions I'd be looking to target there.
And Devin Witherspoon's not a bad pick there either, and that would have been the second option because Jalen
Yeah,
Carter's already off the board, and they
yeah,
probably would have taken him if he fell because then they can
mhm,
justify the whole well, he fell to us.
yeah,
But they wanted to trade back.
hmm,
It would become tough then if you're thinking that they would have went back thinking that there's going to be a cornerback there, and Devin Witherspoon is still there. That's probably going to be their guy. It's going to be similar to how the Falcons did when they stayed put. It
hmm,
just fell in such a way that they didn't expect to be their guy.
yeah.
So let's go with Devin Witherspoon there rather than a tackle.
All right. Devin Witherspoon is off the board. Titans, I'm going to go O-line here. I feel like you want to just get a home run pick here, but I also know that Nicholas Petit-Ferrer and Paris Johnson have already played on the offensive line together, not next to each other, but they have been able to have that synergy. I'm going to be going after somebody who has 36 or over 36-inch arms. Incredible athlete. Peter Skoronsky, those arms, I would just prefer the longer arm length by literally 4 inches and a similar play style. So, or similar play effectiveness. So I'm going to go Paris Johnson.
Paris Johnson, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, get those long guys when you can, man.
Mhm.
Tyron Smith really kind of opened people's eyes to what you can do
Yeah.
with a guy with that kind of build. I mean, we all knew that was a thing,
Yeah.
but yeah, I think he's the guy that really showed what that prototype looks like and
Mhm.
and how you're able to really build a
Yeah,
successful team with a player like that.
for sure.
That's 12 with the Houston Texans. They still own 12, right? We ain't traded
Yes,
that.
they do. We have not traded yet.
All right. So they already took CJ Stroud.
Yep.
They're in a good spot here to take a defensive player that would act as that
Mhm.
leader of their defense. And that guy that's going to help give them that identity on that side of the ball.
Yep.
The best player that I still have on the board for myself would be Myles Murphy here on defense.
Okay.
And the next highest defensive guy I have is a safety, and I'm not sure that they're going to value a safety anywhere near this spot. Um,
Yeah.
so I'm going to go with Myles Murphy here. He's dealt with an injury this offseason, but when he did get an opportunity to test, even
Yeah.
testing injured, he still tested extremely well.
Yeah.
So let's go with Myles Murphy at 10.
I have Miles as
At
a top
12.
5 guy on my board. Yeah, no, I love the idea of Miles Murphy to Houston. It's one of my dream picks for him. So glad that we're on the same page there. The Jets, I assume we'd be doing a trade for Aaron Rodgers. That would obviously not include this selection here. I would debate just going Peter Skoronsky and dealing with the arm length. Worst case scenario, he can kick to the inside. I think I might do that. Realistically, I've heard a lot of Broderick Jones talk to the Jets. So another very solid, consistent player. I'm going to go after Peter, though. At the end of the day, you are getting a 10 to 15 year bona fide starter. And for the pick 13 value, I mean, they got AVT, I think, at pick 13 when they traded up for him. So they're going to hit Golda twice at pick number 13.
Yeah, and that's really the best case scenario for the Jets too, having to
Yeah.
pick between those two types of players, both guys that are probably going to start outside, and if
Yep.
they can't hack it, they're going to have to kick inside. And I
Yep.
think both of those guys have a really good opportunity to play for a very long time in the NFL.
For sure.
So that ends up being a pretty good pick there.
Yeah.
Now we got the Patriots. This one's really tough.
Yeah, it is.
We've heard a lot of talk about Bijan Robinson here as the pick, even with Ramondre Stevenson there. Ramondre Stevenson is not a dynamic runner. He's a good runner. He's a reliable runner.
Yep.
But just like the Detroit Lions letting Jamal Williams walk despite having his 1,000-yard season, sometimes that's just not enough. You got to have more than just a reliable runner. You got to have somebody that's a bigger term guy, a guy that can really get you those home run hits. They could also pick up a tight end. They might be the first to pick a tight end off the board here.
Yeah.
And that would make sense considering how they've won with that in the past. I actually greatly consider picking a wide receiver here. I know the whole Bill Belichick first round receiver thing is always going to come up, and there's going to be the comparisons to guys like N'Keal Harry, which is not useful because they're vastly different players.
Of course.
But I do think that the opportunity for somebody like Bill Belichick to walk away with Bijan Robinson and build an offense around a player of that caliber puts you on a completely different level. If you have
Okay.
an offense that can drive through Bijan Robinson, Mac Jones's limitations don't matter as much. We've seen what
Yeah.
Mac can do well as long as he's
Mhm.
playing in a structured offense. Bijan Robinson gives you structure.
Yeah.
If you want to run the ball, regardless if it's third and long or first and
Mhm.
short or whatever you're doing, you've
Yeah.
got an opportunity to do whatever you want on that field with Bijan Robinson. And those play calling
Oh, yeah.
opportunities are going to be just have his mouth watering.
Mm.
So I'm going to go with Bijan Robinson at that pick for the Patriots.
Awesome. Bijan is an excellent selection. Pick number 15. I mean, I don't think that we're going to see Nolan Smith slip much further than this. Just everybody's saying that Nolan Smith's going to be going extremely highly. It's kind of, I love Nolan Smith. I have him as a top 15 player. He's a really good locker room dude. I don't know if he fits exactly what the Packers usually search for, but neither is Jackson Smith and Jigba, which I think would be the correct selection here. Kind of a perfect storm of, you kind of screwed Aaron Rodgers over for his entire career in terms of drafting early receivers. And all of a sudden you get to draft somebody like Jackson Smith and Jigba this early. I think that's just the correct move. It's the way that I'm going to go. Last year, I would give him a pass for not drafting wide receiver in the first round because of the fact that you had guys like George Pickens and Christian Watson in the second that could step up and be that true number one receiver. This draft, I don't trust somebody who fits their mold of a larger receiver and is someone who can be a primary role player in the rounds 2, maybe round 3 question mark. But if you want to get a bona fide starter, it's going to be here in the first.
So we're going JSN.
Hell yeah. Oh yeah.
See, I would have taken the defender there. I think that's a really bold pick because
I know.
I really think that they would have went that. They need a
Yeah.
lot of stuff.
Mhm.
But God, seeing him in the NFC North is not something I want to see. That's rough for me.
Yeah. Oh yeah. You are on the clock with Washington. This is a fun one. This is an interesting pick. I'm curious about this one.
We did get Devin Witherspoon and Christian Gonzalez off the board, so both the top corners are off. They have a need at linebacker. I don't think that there's a linebacker worth taking this high in the draft.
No.
I think it's possible that they could look at a guy like Nolan Smith and think that they can do what Micah Parsons does in Dallas, try to catch that lightning in a bottle as a linebacker who can also rush. But with as many other needs as they have, I'm not sure that would be the pick.
Yeah.
You know what,
That's
though?
intriguing.
That is kind of tough to pass up.
That is intriguing.
The only other pass rushers that you'd really consider there are both edge guys in Lucas Van Ness and Isaiah Foskey. And I don't think that Lucas Van Ness fits what Washington wants to do. And I don't think that Foskey gives them the kind of versatility that they'd be looking for. The fact that they have a need at both linebacker and edge gives me that Nolan Smith option. And I think that might be a good pick for them because that fills a big need at linebacker for them. For some things, I still think they're going to have to figure that position out. Maybe they double dip and take another linebacker right after that with their next pick.
Fair.
But I think that gives them a lot of pass rushing potential with Nolan Smith.
Wow. I haven't seen that before, but I literally just heard the idea of using Nolan Smith in that Micah role earlier today because Daniel Jeremiah came on with Peter Schrager and they were talking about like, that is so smart. And it's just
league, man.
Yeah, it's incredible. For the Steelers, I'm going to keep this short and sweet. I'm going Joey Porter Jr. I think a DB is more than necessary to add to the squad. I don't think I want Patrick Peterson being the only competent defensive back on the team, and might as well get some legacy while we're at it.
Dig it.
Dig it.
All right, my Detroit Lions at 18.
There you go.
We already got our franchise defining pick for defense here, but it leaves them open to a number of different options. They could be looking at Broderick Jones as a guard. They have a couple of options on their roster currently playing guard, but none of them are long-term, and all of them have had injury issues recently, which makes it pretty difficult to project where they're going to go with the offensive line. True. They could pick a safety corner hybrid like Brian Branch. They could pick another interior defensive lineman like Elijah Cansey or Brian Bressie. You see that a lot at this pick. But I'm actually going to go with Deonte Banks from Maryland. We're gonna pick one of the best athletes in this draft. And Deonte Banks brings that speed and that explosiveness to the position that you really want to have. And if you're getting a guy like Will Anderson and Aiden Hutchinson up front, you're going to need some of those NASCAR packages with Aleem McNeil and James
Oh yeah.
Houston out there on the field all at the same time, and
Hmm.
somebody's got to be back there wreaking havoc in the backfield. So
Oh yeah.
let's throw Deontay Banks back there and give them that speed and explosiveness.
That is a dream. That was my number one selection. I was praying because I heard you were talking about like Kalijah. I was like, come on, please talk about Deontay. Please talk about Deontay. And ah,
Yeah.
that is perfection. With Tampa Bay on the board at pick number 19. I've heard rumors that they might go Lucas Van Ness. Daniel Jeremiah did that in a mock draft they did earlier today. I think that would be perfectly fine. But we have been seeing actually quite a trend for offensive tackle. And if this team is trying to rebuild, honestly, I'm just going to be going after and rebuilding my offensive line 10 out of 10 times. I'd rather try to take swings at developmental edge rushers than developmental offensive linemen. So Broderick Jones is here based on how much the NFL likes him. I'm going to combine that with my grade of him, and we're going to be going after Broderick Jones.
Not a bad move. Like
No,
you said, if they're going to go in, and he can swing inside if he needs to in the first year. And we mentioned that earlier. He's got that versatility to be able to do that.
exactly.
I personally think he ends up at left tackle in his NFL career, but we'll see how that ends up.
Yep.
So you mentioned Lucas Van Ness, who's obviously an option here for the Seahawks who need to get better in their pass rush.
Yep.
But I'm actually going to pass on Lucas Van Ness for Isaiah Foskey.
Ooh.
Both of these guys are top tier athletes.
Yep.
Foskey just seems to be a lot more polished. He's a bit more versatile in what he can do right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the Seahawks are going to want to go for that immediate contribution more than that long term potential here. Even though Foskey has plenty of long term potential on his own.
Yeah.
That's really kind of the selling point for Van Ness, because you can't just build on a bull rush. You got to be able to do more. And the idea is that he has that ridiculous bull rush and he can build more. Foskey may not have that polished of a singular move, but he's got enough other moves that you can probably get a lot more out of him early while you try to develop his pass rush.
Fair. I have not seen the love for Isaiah Foskey lately. I was originally lower on him than the majority. I know. I was lower on him than the majority of people at the beginning. I was known as hater. All of a sudden, I'm his biggest supporter. I'm saying, where the hell is this guy going? Like, everybody's dropping him out of their even second round, potentially third round mock drafts. I'm like,
people are talking themselves out of him for like no reason.
I know. I don't even understand that. And again, I was biased against him, and all of a sudden I'm one of his major supporters. So glad to see that there's still a little bit of love out there for Foskey. Pick number 21 with the Chargers. If Quentin Johnston's here, I'm just going to continue taking him. It's not necessarily the best selection overall based on like what Kellen Moore probably wants. And I think Dalton Kincaid would fit their Dalton Schultz, fetish, so to speak. And I think I'm going to go Quentin Johnston, though. There's just not many guys who are going to have that type of upside. I feel like he's very similarly built to DeAndre Hopkins, but he just doesn't have the assertiveness of DeAndre when it comes to the catch point. But that, I feel, could be something he could develop.
Quentin Johnston there. That's a bit surprising to me.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they're obviously a team that could use that deep threat that he can offer. But I think that they have that a little bit with the guys that they currently have. So that's kind of surprising to me. That leaves us at 22 with the people who always cheat and get their way anyway. And I've been thinking about this one a lot because this is just one of those picks that I want to happen. I don't care that it's not a guy that they're getting who fell. They're not getting a guy who's been sliding down the board like they always end up getting. But this is just one of those fits that I really like, which is Cam Smith. Baltimore. Cam Smith has the biggest mouth of any player in this draft class. And I really like the idea of putting him in the Baltimore secondary and letting him talk smack in the AFC North. He's gonna make some people very angry and force them to make some mistakes. And they're starting to build a defense, that is kind of going back to what they used to do when they had Ed Reed and Ray Lewis. Obviously, they're a long way away from that, but I think that's what they're trying to get to, is that type of defense where they're able to roam over the field with their back seven because their front seven are doing such a good job of getting a pass rush on their own and being a threat to the run game. I think that's the kind of thing they're trying to build, and it would just be so much fun to have a guy that talks that much smack leading the way. So I'm going to give Cam Smith to them.
All right. The Vikings, I think I'm going to just quickly opt in for a Zay Flowers move. You kind of want that dynamic wide receiver too. I love KJ Osborne, but to me, I think that there still is that role where, if Jalen Reagor were actually as talented as he should have been if he were taken before Justin Jefferson, that was kind of the role that, I wish were filled with a more quality player. And Zay Flowers is exactly that guy who could fit into that type of mold. So you got Justin Jefferson, Zay Flowers, KJ Osborne. You're starting to have a legitimately strong receiving core, even without your veteran presence there in Adam Thielen.
Yeah, and that's a really good pick for them. Zay Flowers is a smaller guy. We have a lot of smaller receivers in this class.
Yep.
But he's been bulking up and he's gotten quite a bit larger than he was when he played, and he didn't lose any of that athleticism at all.
Yeah.
That's the big worry when you have a guy that's bulking up, is whether they're going to lose some of that flexibility, some of that mobility, some of that speed.
Yep.
He's shown no signs of that, so that ends up being a good pick for me. I'm going to give Jacksonville a tight end. They've got a lot of things that they need. I feel like we would probably have multiple tight ends off the board by this point, and we're only coming into our first one.
Yeah.
But it's tough for me between Dalton Kincaid, Michael Mayer, and Darnell Washington. All three of those guys, I think, could go in the first round. I think Luke Musgrave could sneak into the first round. I think he probably sticks on day 2.
Yeah.
Same thing with Tucker Kraft. I think that he's probably going to stick to day 2, even though he probably could sneak into the tail end of the first. So I'm actually going to go with Darnell Washington here over Kincaid and Mayer. The Jaguars have been trying to build that offensive identity with Trevor Lawrence and Travis Etienne.
Yep.
And I just really like the idea of getting that premier blocking tight end who's also a viable receiving option, who can beat guys with his athleticism, who has the type of tools to move anywhere on the field that you need him.
Yep.
Dalton Kincaid doesn't really provide you with as much of that blocking potential, and Michael Mayer doesn't give you very much dynamicism with his athletic ability. I think Darnell Washington gives you both of those things, even if you're not going to get them right away. The long term is going to be there, and I think that's what the Jaguars are trying to go for.
Good point. Dougie P also loves his tight ends, so never going to discount that. Dougie P loves his tight ends. For the Giants, they lost Julian Love and, Wink Martindale is the big DBs dude. I'm going to take the potential of Brian Branch 10 out of 10 times if he is on the board. Yeah,
Branch didn't test all that well. As a hybrid guy, though, I'm not sure it's going to matter too much, because you're going to be moving him all over the place, and his tape is good enough that I think that even despite his testing, he's probably pretty firmly in that first round.
Oh yeah.
I think at worst, his poor testing just kind of knocked him out of that early first round, but his tape is so good that you're not going to get outside of the first round with him.
For sure.
I don't like any of the picks for Dallas here. What can we do for a trade?
Okay, so there still are 2 tackles on the board, 1 right tackle, 1 left. I don't think the Dallas Cowboys would necessarily want to move with someone they're competing with in the playoffs, to be fair, or a team that they might compete with in the Super Bowl. So looking at teams that could be trying to poach an offensive tackle from round 2, I think the Pittsburgh Steelers could be a little bit aggressive here. Again, they have 2 second-round picks, so they could leverage maybe a third in order to move up. And that would give Dallas the ability to move back, and I think probably take a top corner, take a running back without having to spend that number 26 overall spot. So that's up to you, though. They have number 32. That's your team that they're talking about. But I mean, Lucas Van Ness is on the board too. There are some teams that like that. Yeah,
let me pull up what that might look like as a trade. So we're looking at pick 26 for pick 32, and probably one 80? Of those.
I think it's 80. I think is it pick 80? Because I think 32. Yeah, I think 80 that Steelers have.
That actually ends up not even being all that much. That's 107%.
Yeah,
which is fine. That's actually almost exactly what the previous trade that we did was. But that was two teams that had mutual benefit in this, and I think that that Dallas is going to want to get a little bit more out of that.
Fair. Jerry likes his money. Jerry likes to win.
Yep.
Jerry likes his W's. Lucas Van Ness, though, I think a team like the Saints could get ballsy here, and the Cowboys could still keep a 5th-year contract on a first-round player. Lucas Van Ness could be something they are trying to move up and get. What are your thoughts on that?
For who moving up?
Saints for LVN.
They could be doing that too. Not even a bad idea. So Dallas moving with the Saints would give us what? It's
a great question.
29th and probably 71.
Yeah. Yeah, I assume so.
That might be a bit much for them, but Dallas could probably send something back in return.
What does
So we can
169 in return do? Because I don't know if Dallas needs to necessarily make
drops it
get
down a
more
little
picks.
bit.
Yeah, because we could do 129 from the Cowboys. Then the Cowboys essentially move up 58 spots for moving back 3.
Yeah, I think
Still,
that's a little bit closer to what might be more acceptable from both parties. That gives us to about 111%
yeah,
trade for the Saints moving up.
yeah. Jerry wins.
Yeah. So
You
when
want
I'm
to do
talking
it?
about the percentages, it's the percentage of value, and we always
Mhm.
try when you're doing a trade up, you
Yeah.
generally expect to see a little bit higher than 100% worth of value for
Mhm.
trade ups because
Yeah.
that's the cost of trading up. The cost of trading up
Fair.
isn't an even pick, right?
Yeah.
The cost is that you're giving up a little bit extra.
Mhm.
So yeah, let's do 26 and 129 for 29 and 71.
I like it. The
Sound
Saints
good?
move up and select a Lucas Van Ness. Love it.
All right.
Okay. For the Bills, I'm going to take a little bit of a curveball, probably compared to what you expect, but my fans, I'm going to take a curveball compared to what I normally do. I was going to curveball you and go after a linebacker here and Jack Campbell, who I absolutely adore. I'm going to go Anton Harrison.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, I think the reason why is one, he started out the year by playing a game at right tackle. He already has experience there. So I do think, you could relieve Spencer Brown. You're also potentially, because he does have that right tackle versatility, taking him away from the Bengals, potentially from the Eagles too, if they want to develop an offensive lineman, as well as the Chiefs. So I think he also is short enough to play guard if need be. So I just want to get a consistent offensive lineman, protect your probably $500 million asset there in Josh Allen.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah.
Um, I'm also going to throw a bit of a curveball here, not by position, but
Hmm.
by the player that I'm taking.
Oh.
The Bengals have a lot of stuff they need. They have a
Mm-hmm.
really good roster, but they could use a couple of things. They need some solid offensive linemen.
Yes.
They need some cornerbacks, and they could
Mm-hmm.
use a better pass rush.
Yes.
And it's that last one that we're going to address here because we have some really
Mhm.
good options in Will McDonald, BJ Ojulari. Both of those guys are sitting there. Will McDonald has a lot of athletic talent.
Yep.
There's a reason that he's being thought of as highly as he is because that upside is viewed as so premier, the kind of talent that he's bringing.
Mm-hmm.
BJ Ojulari is hurt right now. He didn't test all that well. I keep having to
Yep.
put on his card when I post that he tested while recovering from a hamstring injury. He
Yep.
was not 100%. He was just testing to say, here's where I am in my recovery,
Mm-hmm.
essentially. But I'm not picking either of those guys.
Ooh.
I'm actually going to be picking Adetomiwa Adebawari from Northwestern.
Yeah.
The Bengals going for that home run hit in terms of athleticism here.
Yep.
This is a player that doesn't get mocked in the first round a lot, and I understand why.
Mm-hmm.
He plays interior as much as he does edge. He's probably going to be viewed as that 3 to 5 tech type of pass rusher.
Yep.
But the type of athleticism that you get at defensive tackle with a guy like him is insane. You don't get guys on the interior that run in the 4.4 range. That doesn't happen. Those guys don't exist. You create those players in Madden and then feel bad about yourself
Yep.
for cheating, right?
Exactly.
And I still think that this is a pick that could come out of nowhere for a lot of people. But when you have a defensive tackle who's running a 4.49, literally the fastest a defensive tackle has ever run.
Yeah.
He's got a 10-yard split of 1.55, also the fastest for any defensive tackle ever.
Crazy.
Both his vertical and broad are 99th percentile overall, some of the best numbers ever. His 3-cone for a defensive tackle is 98th percentile, one of the best ever. And it's his shuttle is all the way down at 98th percentile, 98.4. Just those kind of numbers don't come around very often, and I think the Bengals take that kind of a swing here.
Fair. I do not blame you for going that. That was actually the guy I was going to bring up because I just think that also his versatility from kicking inside could also benefit them because now you have someone where they'll eventually fit a role, not necessarily one you draft him for, but you actually know he'll stick to the roster and have a starting role. Cowboys at 29, though. I do believe that a tight end should come off the board. We've seen that there's a lot of hype on these dudes. Michael Mayer, apparently there's a lot of love for him because he reminds them a lot of Jason Witten. Could make sense. I think Dalton Kincaid is the better receiver. And I also think that they're going to be more focused on the air more than the ground. So I'm going to go Dalton Kincaid here, who is slipping only because, if I'm not mistaken, a back injury has been kind of hampering him from being able to properly boost his stock in the offseason.
Yeah, we know another tight end that had a back injury that kind of hampered his draft stock and ended up going in the second round, who did all right, I feel, in New England for a while. There's some precedent there that we can arbitrarily compare.
Yep, exactly. It's just the golden rule, don't really worry about back injuries on tight ends. That's a new golden rule.
I'm still Eagles at 30, yeah?
Yes.
All right. So what did we pick before with the Eagles? We took
moved up for Christian Gonzalez.
So we've got that cornerback need out of the way. We've still got a need at pass rusher. We've got a couple of guys that we already mentioned who are sitting there.
Yep.
We have some secondary need in the back end. I don't think there's anybody really there that they would really consider at the back end of the round. And linebacker, we could have a linebacker come up here.
Yeah.
And that's tough for me because that's probably what I'm thinking between a player like Trenton Simpson or Jack Campbell, and probably Will McDonald. I don't think that they go with BJ Ojulari here.
Okay.
I think it's going to be between Will McDonald, Simpson, and Jack Campbell.
Okay. Do you think that the Eagles could try to trade back and regain some of that draft capital that they spent moving up? Because that's what I'm saying. It's Howie. And Jordan Addison's on the board. And I did this with my Steelers for my mock draft. You might as well pair up Kenny with Jordan Addison. So if the trade is available, since again, these are both your teams, Howie could try to squeeze a little bit extra out of the Steelers. I think pick number 120 might be way overvalued, but that 5th-year contract also has plenty of value.
Didn't we already trade up the Steelers from 32? No, you traded up.
We were debating
we looked at it. Yeah, we looked at it. We didn't actually do the trade.
Yeah, we were debating on it for 26.
Yeah.
And this is obviously far more down the board, but the 5th-year contract's a 5th-year contract. They could try to request something back from Howie, but it's a risky business trying to get something from Howie.
We could probably do 30, and are you thinking 120 for that?
I mean, their next pick is 241, if I'm not mistaken. I don't think that's going to get the deal done anytime soon. I mean, technically, Howie could give up like 219, squeeze that through. But besides that, I'm not fully sure if Howie's going to be able to squeeze out anything. But is it worth it to the Steelers to get Jordan because I think if I'm going to be honest, I might get Jordan for the Chiefs. If he's there, he's a really special talent, and they might need a little bit of extra spark in that receiving room. They've shown that they have no reserves on that.
This is another one where the Eagles aren't really getting a premium in draft picks back, but they're only moving back a couple of spots.
Yes.
So I think that does make sense for them. So I think that is probably going to be accepted.
Let's go. So Pittsburgh Steelers move up. They're my Pittsburgh Steelers. So I'm always excited to get Kenny Pickett, his Biletnikoff winner here in Jordan Addison. And you know what? I'm going to let you end off the draft since I just totally shellacked that pick 30 for you.
That's cool. Well, it's the Chiefs. And if you're going to have a second team, it may as well be the Chiefs lately, right? You may as well pick the best quarterback in the league currently. They've got a need at tackle. They've got some wide receiver need, a little bit of pass rush, both interior and exterior. They do have some secondary need, but I don't think there's really anybody on the board that they'd really consider here. It's a bit surprising that Kelly Ringo's fallen this far.
Yes.
We've also got Kalijah Cansey sitting there and Brian Bressie. Both of those guys I've heard may drop out of the first round entirely, though. So I don't think that's really out of the question. So they're kind of sitting here with Andy Reid licking his chops, trying to figure out which guy he gets to pick, and he's got to pick of the litter here.
You even have DeJuan Jones on the board too.
We do, and that would be a very easy pickup for him because you're going from a guy who's not super athletic, but also doesn't win that way. He wins with his length and his size. And I think that would be a very easy transition to jump right back into DeJuan Jones. But I'm not going to go that.
Okay.
I think I'm going to ultimately go. No, I'm not. I think I'm going to play it a little bit safer here. I know Andy Reid
Okay.
isn't known for playing it safe, but even looking at DeJuan Jones, I don't really think that there's as much upside there. Even if it's
Mhm.
going, it does seem like a very clean fit, right? You're taking a guy
Yeah.
that is very similar to the guy that they're losing and slotting him in there.
Mhm.
I don't really like doing that just because of that. I think that there's
Fair.
still enough of a drop off there, and I'm not really as high on DeJuan Jones as a lot of other folk are.
Fair.
So we're gonna finish off the first round with Will McDonald out of Iowa State. We're gonna finish with a high upside edge rusher that they don't
Yeah.
really have to rush. Um, Andy Reid gets to sit a little while and try to get him to develop. Will McDonald has some of the best athletic talent in this draft, and he's got that size where you can move him around
Mm.
in that front seven. You don't have to keep him just on the edge as a run setting guy.
Yeah.
You can get him off ball and move him in different spots and try to get him from different platforms. I think that'd be a really interesting wrinkle for Andy Reid's defense there.
Absolutely. So that is going to be the end of the draft. Thank you guys so much for watching. Can't thank you, of course, for coming on and making time during literally the draft season, which is literally everything based around RAS. So feel free to give yourself another shout out. Tell people where they can find you.
Yeah, you guys can find all my work at ras.football. Hopefully that's easy to remember. That was the intention. You can also find me on Twitter at MathBomb, on the stunt, also at MathBomb. I also do the Pro Football Network mock draft simulator, which you'll also see me doing on draft night, making sure that that's updated after every pick. So you can check out any of those things and support my work in any way that you feel like, or just yell at me on Twitter. That's always a good show.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you for coming on. Thank you guys so much for watching. We'll see you guys on the far side. Peace.